Hey everybody, welcome to Reaching Out with Zack Carter. I'm your host, Zack Carter. Before we begin the episode, I highly recommend you check out part 1 of my talk with Mona Siddiqui. You get to hear her thoughts on being a Muslim in America before and after 9/11, her beliefs about Sharia law, and you'll find out in the bonus interview section whether she had an arranged marriage or not. Alright, well, let's get started with part 2 of the interview.
Pakistan was born in 1947. Where were we after 7 years? I think we were just where white male Protestant could own property. I'll argue that a lot of these countries are not being held back by religion, but held back by the phenomenon of colonialism and oppression over centuries by the Western civilization.
Welcome to Reaching Out. I'm your host, Zack Carter. Please join me as I speak with a diverse group of people to find out their thoughts on religion, politics, and culture. So your brand of from this discussion, once again, I haven't dove into it, but it seems reasonable to me.
Okay.
What my concern is as I was studying and getting ready for this interview, I went on to the Pew Research website, and they were talking about the countries that the citizens believe in the enforcement of Sharia law, and it seems like that is a growing, and Sharia law encompasses a lot of things we talked about, like female genital mutilation and hanging people if they're gay. So a lot of these things that are concerning. Even Pakistan, from what I saw, is about 80% of the people in Pakistan that are Muslim believe in Sharia law, and then you have somewhere like Afghanistan is 99%. Yeah. And so when I see these things, that's what's concerning to me. And you say you see these Muslims going and moving into Europe, and you're seeing some of the extremists coming out of that as well. And you would argue that it's from being mistreated by the society, but that's my concern. So what are your thoughts?
Well, that is my concern too, and in that sense, sometimes I do think it's in my backyard, and and if you talk about it, there's a lot of us who think that's not our problem. We're American Muslim, and these problems are within these Muslim majority countries who, I think a lot of the problem is because there is no separation of church and state in many of these countries.
And I was going to get to that.
That's the number one issue that I have, but just going back to the idea of Sharia, what that translates to. Yeah. So it's Islamic law. And so it's similar to the canon law for Catholics, and I think the halakha for Jews. Okay. And so the way I try to analogize it, which I think to make sense of it, is that, so the Sharia law is to the Quran what statutory law is to the Constitution. Okay. So Sharia law is basically a code. It's a legal code that helps you kind of navigate how to practice Islam. All right. So it's supposed to be a good thing. Laws are a good thing. Laws are meant to create order in society and kind of have certain ways of doing things to maintain order. But like any law. Sometimes laws are unjust. Sometimes they're not really. How many of our laws have been deemed unconstitutional?
There have been a few.
Right. Yeah. So I would say that the Sharia is no exception. Okay. I think the Sharia, it has particular trouble in that problem, and that's me in the sense there's no one Sharia. Every country has their own way of adapting code in their country, and a lot of it is based on the patriarchal culture that's rampant in many of these societies, and it's written by all men, and similar to our American laws, our Constitution has been written by all white men. So over time we've had the Bill of Rights. We've kind of corrected some of our wrongs and made things better. Even 100 years ago we had a law where women couldn't vote. That was like less than 100 years ago. So certainly Sharia law has major deficits in the way that it has been applied in different countries, namely oppression of women, oppression of other minority groups, gay, the LGBT community, and I also recognize and very disturbed by the rising extremism in Pakistan, especially by the young community. And so much so, I mean, I was born there. I was 4 when we moved here, and I have this strong desire. Every year I argue with my husband, I want to go to Pakistan. I want to take my kids there. I want them to see the beauty of the country that I have seen in my visits with my family before 9/11, before all this stuff started happening. But every year we're too scared to go. And because we have accents, we have, we don't fit, and there is that there. There is that piece there. So it's, so we have great lawyers there who are fighting this Sharia system, trying to make it better in Pakistan and many of these other countries. I mean, I think it would get a lot better if we did not have, if we separated our religious laws from our secular laws.
Okay.
So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Oh, I do. Can I add one more thing?
No, you can't add anything else. So
the idea of creeping Sharia, we always laugh about it.
Creeping Sharia.
Yeah, it was. Somebody said it like how Sharia is going to creep up into the United States and take over the laws of this country. Yeah. So that's a fear. But what is important to know is Sharia cannot be applied in the U.S. because Islam requires Muslims to follow the laws of the land in which they live. And that's not me saying that. Any scholar you talk to, if you talk to our imam, if you talk to any religious scholar anywhere in this country, will say that Islamic law itself requires Muslims to follow the law in which the land that they live. Now, I think the confusion with Sharia is here in the United States because of this. Sometimes we have contracts between Muslims, like marriage or divorce contracts, because like in any law, American legal system has laws for divorce and marriage and all of that. So does the Sharia. So there's certain contracts, like a marriage contract between a Muslim that may need to be enforced in court, and they're like, well, it was done in Sharia, and then the judge may look at it and say, but hey, some of these terms are not really sanctioned by U.S. law or state law, and so we can't really apply this, or this contract is null or void because it's not, that kind of thing. So that really depends on the facts of the case and the situation when it goes into court, whether or not that contract can be applied if it incorporates terms of Sharia law from whatever country that contract was made in. But there's no way. Think about it. Yeah. How can Sharia come into the United States? Laws are made by our legislators. How can that? How can that really even happen?
But would it be possible if you have Muslims coming over from these countries and getting into office and then changing the laws?
Because like me?
So like people that have more extreme views. So let's say like women of modesty, like Muslims from some of these countries where they say that women have to wear hijabs or there's severe punishments, and if they come into the country and get elected into office, part of the law is that you can change the law. So couldn't they use that reasoning to come in and switch the law?
It's interesting that you say that. Yes, that can happen, but it is already happening with Christian extremism.
In what way?
Well, let's talk about the bathroom bill. Let's talk about those are in the we have to what is that law in North Carolina that happened? About just making sure. I think there was a law, and gosh, I don't want to cite legislation and then I'm wrong, about just kind of prohibiting a transgender person from using a bathroom with the idea. And what is that based on? It's based on what a man is supposed to be and what a woman is supposed to be. Where does that come from? That comes from Christianity. That's an extremist. I would say that's a extremist Christian interpretation. So that's getting into our laws, and then you have advocates fighting against that. So. I wish, gosh, I can think of some more if given some more time, but there are certainly laws being proposed all the time that are grounded in extremist values and trying to be forced upon the rest of that community or that state.
Well, but I wouldn't argue that the bathroom laws are based on Christian principle. I think they're just based on science. Like there are men, and then there are women.
Yeah.
Your gender is tied to your your gender is tied to your sex. So, and this is the confusing thing about the whole debate is, why do we even talk about women's rights when gender doesn't matter? So this always been a point of just in my head, I haven't been able to wrap my brain around, as far as like, that was a strange one for me to argue that this is Christians trying to put their worldview, whereas I would say you could pull that from a scientific point of view, less than a Christian.
Yeah, but but we've had laws prohibiting women from attending colleges, from attending. I mean, we have faced all of these things. We know that the laws that we have should not sort of create inequities or create this hierarchical system, which we're putting it all under racism for now.
Sure, yeah.
But they do.
And I would argue Christianity is the reason that we have gotten rid of those laws. So yes, the founders were Christian white males, and they created a constitution that allowed for us, 200 years later, to begin making laws so that women can vote, and that blacks are no longer slaves, and that Jim Crow would get rid of that it was Christian values, that the Bible doesn't teach slavery is okay. It says that men should be free, and that people were using scripture wrongly to pass laws like slavery.
Yeah.
So.
And we also had the Naturalization Act in that limited naturalization or American status only to white people. I think that was 1790. We had that law, which was just abolished in this past century. So yeah, and I think some of those concepts were tied into religion and the idea of whiteness. Whether we had a sick man. We had a Supreme Court case in which a sick man, SIKH, was arguing for nationality. And is not getting it because of
when was this?
Gosh, I can't remember.
Was it within like 20 years, or was it like?
No, it was a while back.
Okay.
It was a while back. But I mean, I'm saying throughout our history, we've had unjust laws that are sort of grounded in the idea of religion. I mean, I would argue that they do come from Christian principles
and
practiced by the majority.
Well, but so. But Christianity is a religion that has spread throughout the world, that every culture and race has adopted in some way. Not every culture, but en masse. And it was designed, I believe, by God to allow for everyone, because even Paul, that wrote the majority of the New Testament, said, I'm going to the Gentiles. Gentiles is everyone who are not Jews. And so I would argue that the Christian principles allowed this country to become the place where it is now, where it is accepting, where it is diverse, where you have other countries that didn't start off with Christianity have a harder time getting to the place where we're at. And if they do get to that place, a lot of times they're emulating what our country is doing. And I would argue it is because Christianity that we're in the place that we are, where we are so accepting of people, where we are diverse.
That's so interesting that you say that.
So that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I like to share my opinion.
Go for it.
I personally think it's
you
not...
You can say I'm wrong. That's fine.
I mean, in my opinion, I don't know that it's grounded in Christianity or religion, but I think it's grounded in the idea of America, in this crazy, what is it, experiment of America.
It is a crazy, yeah.
The idea that we're all immigrants, and from the beginning we've been a work in progress because of the people that have entered the country, because of the immigrants that have entered the country, that we are, as a society, always evolving and changing, and all in the end doing the right thing. The idea of nativism or just discrimination against the minority group has been seeped in the history of this country from the beginning. But over time, I think it's the sort of the laws in our system that is working towards equality based on, values of equality, which are a principle of Islam. as well as Christianity, as well as Judaism.
Well, and that's why I would say this is the beginning of Genesis 1 talks about like, you know, all men are created in the image of God, and that is the idea that we get that okay, so if all men are created in the image of God, then we have to respect everyone, and we can't. If I kill someone that looks different than me, I'm destroying someone who was created in the image of God. And that concept was through Judaism and Christianity. And like you said, if that's part of the Quran, then that would be in Islam as well.
But we've had to work really hard as a country and fight really hard to get where we are.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'll argue that a lot of these countries are not being held back by religion, but held back by the phenomenon of colonialism.
Okay.
And oppression over centuries by the Western civilization. If you think about it, Pakistan was born in 1947.
Okay.
Where were we? 47. What year is it? How many years has it been?
That was
not good
right
at
after
math.
World War II, right? So
yeah.
It's been, 70?
Yeah.
70 years now?
70 years. So where were we after 70 years? I think we were just where white male Protestant could own property, that's where we were 70 years. Even before. But if you think about it, a lot of these countries are just trying to figure all of this out. A lot of them are new.
They're
and
in the growing pains stages.
Exactly. They're in the growing pains because of this phenomenon of colonialism by the West, this systematic oppression for centuries, which they're now getting out of. And what a lot of these Muslim countries are still dealing with is, there's just so much into that is affecting. We talk about racism in this country now. We understand the ramifications of slavery and the Jim Crow era are very much alive and well today. Very much alive. I don't know if you agree with me or not.
I would disagree, but
okay.
I'm going to let you talk on it, yeah.
Sure. I think, just because our laws outlaw slavery and discrimination based on your race doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It's systematic. It's insidious. It's been there from the beginning, and we're working at it in different ways of getting out of that. And I would say in those countries they're dealing with a lot of the oppression, being othered by a Western civilization that deemed them less than. So they're still struggling with those pains. So I don't think America's doing better because the majority are Christian here. I don't think that's fair to say that.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so out of curiosity, we're going to move on a little bit. I would love to begin diving into politics a little bit, and we've already kind of touched on it. How has your faith impacted your political beliefs?
Sure.
It's a big question.
Yeah.
I can see it in your eyes. You're like, wow, where do you start on this?
How do I dissect this?
Because you've said, hey, I'm a feminist, which I think is interesting.
Yes.
And you've
yes.
Anyways, go for it. I don't want to direct you on where you want to go with this. So,
yes, I would say our prophet Jesus and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, were feminists as well, because they fought for the equality of women or the elevated status of women. So I would say perhaps my feminism stems from that.
Okay.
But I don't know if it comes from my immigrant experience or my experience of being different and trying to navigate myself, but to me, the idea of social equity is just so important. The idea of our, and I think that may be why I even went into law. I'm a lawyer by profession, and just the idea of justice is such an integral part of Islam, of the idea of social justice, and to me, justice is having a political system that treats people fairly. And when they haven't been treated fairly for maybe oppressive laws that we've had in the past, that it's government's responsibility to put those folks or protect the minorities or to elevate them to the status so that they can be in a fair playing ground. What is that term? Just a fair playing field with the rest of...
You mean equality?
Equality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it becomes government's responsibility to try to work towards a society that is fair, inclusive, and welcoming to all people.
Okay. And if you don't want to get into it, that's fine. But I'd love to hear, and I have an idea of how you lean politically, but I think Muslims have this interesting spot that they're in as far as in the politics in the U.S. because morally it seems like you would side more with Republicans because they've tended to be more so discouraging homosexual behavior and discouraging sleeping together before marriage and all these things, whereas you have the Democrats have seemed like they've wanted to partner more with the Muslims in America. I'm curious as to what you see when it comes to that stuff.
Sure. Yeah. And again, this is just my perception. So I'm a kid of the 80s. I grew up in the 80s, and every Muslim I knew voted for Reagan and loved him like anything. We were mostly voted Republican in the Reagan era, and I think even when I think that started changing actually after 9/11, and I think it was the way that Bush handled it, and I think it was just creating. Although it's complicated, it's nuanced because he tried really hard to. Say no, Muslims are good, but then again creating, are you with us or are you against us? And then that kind of us versus them mentality. When that started, that's when I think Muslims started feeling othered, right? And so I think that's where they started feeling marginalized and started becoming more alienated from the Republican Party. And I think that has sort of kept moving towards that way, moving left just because of feeling othered by the Republicans in power, because of the way that it was handled. A lot of the things, the way the Iraq War, no wait, that was before, so 9/11, the way Iraq was attacked really from after, as a response to Taliban and just kind of, like, hey, you're after, what's really going on here? Is this like a battle against countries of Muslim majority, what's really going on here? And that's when I think a lot of Muslims started questioning what the Republican agenda was. And I don't know, that's my instinct. That's sort of when the shift started happening. But now I know there are Muslims that voted Republican, but for the most part the overwhelming majority voted for Hillary. Or didn't vote because they did not like Hillary.
So they are like, if I can't go this way, can't go the other way, I'm just going to sit out.
Right. And I think it was because, at this point, we have no choice. So, we had this one candidate or this one party that seems to be really perpetuating the idea that Muslims are a cancer in this country and they need to be out. We need to have a total and absolute Muslim ban, and we're sitting here thinking, oh my God, but this is the only country I know of. I'm American and I'm proud of it, and we're not welcome. The feeling of not being welcome anymore, and now just fighting for an America that we want. Wait, I feel like I'm digressing.
No, you're good. Yeah, you've answered the question. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and you had touched on it before. I got a few more questions for the main interview, and then we'll get into the bonus interview. What are we at right now? Yeah, we'll get moving. So, you feeling all right? Everything good? Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I have my caffeine.
You have your caffeine. That's perfect. That's perfect. Okay. Yeah, I got 2 or 3 more questions I'd like to dive into. And then we'll do the fun stuff. So we've done all the serious stuff. So hasn't been too bad, right?
No, it's fine.
I've tried to be a nice guy about it.
No, it helps me kind of unpack it too.
Sure, that's great. Yeah, it's fun to have these conversations. I've pretty much known. I knew a guy who was Muslim in high school, and so I hung out with him a little bit.
Yeah.
And I did a program when I was an RA in college where we did a interfaith meeting where we talked about charity, the differences of charity between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And so I met a Muslim at that meeting. And so I haven't had a chance to have a conversation with anyone that has your beliefs. And so this has been informative and very fun for me.
Oh, great.
So I've read one of the aims of Islam, and you had mentioned it before, is to combine church and state. And that's a lot of what has to do with and I blanked on the word, Sharia law. Yeah. And so you had said the problem is that they're trying to combine church and state, and you want to separate it. So could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's my personal opinion. So Islam is like a submission to the will of Allah. That's sort of how we kind of define it. So submission, not just going to Friday prayer, or like you would say going to Sunday church on Sunday, and then the rest of the week, just not thinking about God. For us, we are required to pray 5 times a day. So it's sort of ingrained, and so it's not just. I mean, it's a part of our life. I mean, I think it is for all faiths as well. I mean, there are certain elements. We have the 5 pillars. We have the prayer 5 times a day. We have the Ramadan, where you have fasting from sunrise to sunset. We have charity that we're required to give, not just during Ramadan, but there's a charity element, and then there's a couple of other pillars. But there's just the idea of the all-encompassing nature of just striving towards a connection with God, and you connect towards with prayer, fasting, and these are all different ways of connecting with God. So there is a concept of if Islam is a way of life, that's how it sort of becomes codified into certain actions you take. Like if you have like if you're, let's say you're getting married, marriage has to be done in a certain way. Like you have to have, you have to have a certain number of witnesses. You have to have a haq meher, which is like a kind of like a amount of financial money you promise in case of divorce. Okay. Or those kinds of concepts. I think in Judaism they
have the same thing. Actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
I believe, I've heard. I listened to a podcast with a guy that's Jewish, and I believe he said that they have the same thing.
Sure.
And I think he said that it was $50 million that he, or something crazy that he agreed, because he was like, I'm gonna stay with this woman the rest of my life. Yeah. And so the father came to him and was like, how much do you want to make it for? And I think he said something crazy like, make it $50 million.
Oh, yeah. No, So we have that as well. So I think that's sort of how it becomes codified in day-to-day life, because it's sort of it seeps in so many elements, and it becomes it can become a part of the Sharia. But I mean, and then of course you can be a Hindu or a Christian and live in a Muslim majority country, and a lot of these laws don't apply to you. Like for example, it's my understanding in Pakistan, a Muslim cannot buy alcohol, but a non-Muslim can. Okay. And so sometimes what I'm hearing happens is that folks who are Muslim are asking their Christian friends to go and buy alcohol for them, and that kind of
That's
stuff.
Hilarious.
Yeah. So
could you go buy me some booze? That's hilarious. Maybe that's how we'll all come together over some drinks.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. But because that's something that's a big no alcohol we don't drink.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's
something that's kind of divided on beliefs in Christianity. Some people believe no alcohol, but people are like, well, but Jesus turned a bunch of barrels of water into wine, so seems to give him the thumbs up. So
Oh, that's interesting, because I didn't realize it was in Christianity. I know with Judaism, it's we share the pork thing. Okay. I mean, I think very strict Jews. My understanding is do not eat pork. We do not eat pork. Like Muslims typically don't. Practicing Muslims typically don't eat pork.
Yeah, I mean, it's just certain. There's so many denominations in Christianity, and there are certain churches that preach like it is a sin for you to drink, even if it's like one drink. And so that's not my belief. And I have verses I use to back it up, and then they have, some people have the belief that you shouldn't drink, and they have verses to back it up as well. So,
Right. Yeah, exactly. The problem is when it becomes law, and that's why I sort of believe in a secular state, because with faith, with religion, with the text, there are so many different interpretations. Yeah. Why are we forcing one interpretation down a whole society's throats,
Yeah.
and we are, and that's where the inequities start happening. You know, like one of the things that really disturbs me about one of the laws in Pakistan is about Ahmadis. It's a very small sect of Muslims, but the government does not even consider them Muslims. And if you, I think to get a passport or something, you have to kind of sign a statement that that you think this sect is un-Islamic or something like that.
Wow.
You know, I mean, there's a lot of inequity there, but I will argue that is not part of Islam. That's not what our faith is. This is actually contrary to faith, but it's a way that a political system is being used to oppress the minority, which we know happens all over the world. I don't think it's limited to a Muslim majority country.
Sure. So you would definitely separate church and state.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I used to be, in all honesty, when I was younger, I was kind of against it. I was like, you know, this country was founded on Christian principles. You shouldn't be separating church and state. I'd not even believe that a minute, because just thinking about it for a second, like,
interesting.
Well, because, you know, so I wouldn't want, like, if I sent my kids to a public school, I wouldn't want the teacher to teach my child that Islam is the correct religion, is the way you should go.
Right.
I wouldn't want that. So how am I going to say, I think a teacher should teach to an Islamic child, hey, Christianity is the one way. That is that is my belief. And I don't think there's any problem if the kid goes up and talks to the teacher and it's like, hey, I heard you're a Christian, I want to know what your beliefs. I think that's fine. But like, I don't think you should be preaching. And there's a lot of things I don't think in public schools. Well, if you want my honest opinion, I want the government out of schools completely. But but if we are going to have public schools, you got to have like a neutral ground. And so that's,
absolutely.
You know.
And I'll also argue this whole idea of religious freedom is one of the main reasons I feel so welcome and in this. I mean, this is, you know, feel that I'm just as vested in the country as you are. If it was a Christian nation, then I would feel that I was maybe not welcome.
Sure.
And I think that's part of what makes, you know, America, I think, the greatest. I mean, we have major issues, but the greatest country in the world. And I would never want to live anywhere else in the world. I'm very grateful for the way our system is and how we've evolved, and especially after this whole election thing happened. You know, how so many people came together and sort of stood for the idea of religious freedom and loving, you know, each other, even though we're different. Just how, you know, being made to feel welcome in a political climate where you were like, get out of here, we don't want you.
Sure.
I mean, that's how I feel.
Yeah. Sure. So staying on the topic of separation church and state, I'm curious. I was talking to my dad about the interview, and he said I should ask you about the cake shop case that's in the Supreme Court right now.
Oh yeah.
Which I thought would be interesting to get your perspective on it. And is that something that you'd feel comfortable to talk about? Yeah?
Sure. The cake shop case.
So,
this is a case where the cake maker does not want to make a cake for the couple that are same-sex.
It comes down to pretty much two laws. This is the freedom of speech, freedom of religion. They're actually arguing, the lawyers of the cake shop are arguing for freedom of speech actually over freedom of religion. And apparently the cake baker said, you know, I'll give you this cake, but I'm not going to decorate it with any kind of homosexual, you know, whatever. And so, you know, their argument is you're discriminating against us. So it'd be interesting as a Muslim woman to hear your perspective on that court case, because that's going to be a big one. That's going to affect, you know, both our religions, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, number one, I do think the cake baker is discriminating based on his, you know, whatever belief, you know, discriminating. But the question is whether it's legal, being a private business, right? Whether the state law sanctions that kind of freedom. I think, like, it reminds me of that other case where the woman who refused to marry a same-sex couple, was that even though the state... I haven't heard of. I don't know. Yeah.
I know what she was referring to. It was I believe like this Caucasian
woman, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and she refused to marry, and then like there was like this huge uproar about it. Surprising anybody.
When was this?
Maybe a year or 2 years ago.
Where?
Yeah.
So what's the story?
Yeah, so she refused to marry. She was a person. Gosh, I can't remember the details of it, but she's hired by the state, and then I think it happens in court.
Okay, so she's not like a pastor or anything.
No,
She was just given the license to marry people.
Something like that. But she refused to. Yeah, she refused to.
Marry same.
Yeah, marry same sex.
Okay.
Yeah, she said I shouldn't be forced to do that as part of my job.
Okay.
Like it was actually part of her job.
Okay.
That was marrying people, and in that particular state, gosh, I'm so ashamed. I'm a lawyer. I should know what's that she refused to marry them, and so. So, I mean, I think in that case, if that's the job you have and you're not fulfilling your duties, and you're discriminating, that violates the law.
Because you're being paid by the government.
Right, right. So I think, in my personal view, I think that's different. I think the other case is a little bit more complex. It really it bothers me a lot, but I think at the end of the day, if the state law allows for freedom. It really depends on the interpretation of the discrimination law, and I think the law should be tailored in a way to prohibit that kind of behavior.
Really?
Yes. It should, because personally, from a policy perspective, I think as a country, as we evolve and grow, as we have over the years, we should work towards being a more welcoming, inclusive state and accept all of our differences.
So you would say that you think the law should pretty much say, as a business, you have to, no matter what you believe, serve everyone, no matter what. Like, there's no discrimination whatsoever.
Yeah, I think if you're going, gosh, this is my personal view.
We're asking your personal view.
If you're going into a business of cake baking, I think you should serve all people, humans, regardless of their background or their differences.
So even if it was like a Muslim who also disagreed with gay marriage, and they were asked to make these cakes, you would say the same thing about Muslim cake bakers?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the same thing. If you don't, even if you don't agree with, if your religious beliefs are different, you should still treat people fairly. That's part of faith. That comes from faith. Treating people with dignity is part of our faith. And so, if you're going to reject a gay couple, you can reject a black person.
Yeah.
You can reject a woman.
Yeah.
You can reject a Muslim.
Yeah.
Where does it end?
Yeah. Well, that would actually. So, my argument would be that you should be allowed to, and you probably sounds like you would disagree with this.
Yeah.
You should be allowed to discriminate against black people. You should be allowed to discriminate against Muslims or gay people.
Yeah.
I think that's disgusting.
Yeah.
And I think that you should serve everyone equally. However, I don't think the government should tell a business what to do, because those the way those people, if they're rejected, can basically have reparations for what just happened. Is they can go across the street, buy a cake from another shop. This first business will go out of business. That is the punishment. If you're going to discriminate, then the society as a whole is going to punish you by not buying your cakes. And so this gay couple can, at this point, go on Amazon. They can buy a cake. They can buy a gay cake topper. And so I'm for utmost freedom. So as much freedom as you can get.
It reminds me of Adam Smith's theory of economic sort of austerity, the idea that that you have a free market and things will fall into place where they're supposed to because of human nature and all of that. And I don't agree with that because I'll tell you why.
Go for it.
Well, for this piece anyway, I think, he can go to another cake, but it starts to breed hate. And we're it really starts. It's that we're in a society that's saying it's okay to kind of, you can open up a business, but you can just limit it to who you want, to white Christians. You can limit it to that. I mean, as a society, how is that going to make other folks feel? I feel like, especially for, and I'm saying it in the term of immigrants. When immigrants come in, they depend on these constitutional laws that we have, freedom of religion. I guess freedom of, it's complicated, but the idea that they're going to be treated fairly in their job, like if they apply for a job, they're not going to be discriminated against based on the color of their skin or their religious, name that they have. Like, actually, that happens in Europe a lot. There's a huge study that came out on. This is huge about like men named with Muslim names not getting jobs out of extremely high, qualified folks. I don't know. It just kind of gets into this slippery slope of treating people differently, and I think we should treat people fairly as a principle of equal protection.
Okay. Well, that's going to be something. I think you should treat people fairly and equally. That would
but
be
the law
something
should
that we're
not
going to
mandate
have to,
it.
The law should no. I don't believe so. I think that when the government begins to I think the government's just bad at its job.
Yeah.
And I think that so the law states that you shouldn't discriminate against minorities or whatever,
right.
but yet you see inner city schools where those children aren't doing well in school, whereas you have, white schools that are doing better. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Yeah. But just because it's in law doesn't mean it's going to happen. And so I think if you take the government out of the school system, for instance, you get someone who's a smart marketing mind and say, how can we make money and help these kids in poorer areas succeed? Because if you can get a system down where you're helping people that have lower scores on their tests jump up, you begin making money. So I think there's an incentive to help people that are minorities or whatever. Like at the bank that I work at, if it's against the law, we have to document how many black people that we and women that we open loans for, but we are pressured by the people that we're employed by to open loans. So my incentive to take care of my family is on the fact that I need to make these sales. Yeah. So I don't care if you're Muslim. I don't care if you're black. I don't care if you're female. Yeah. If you're going to help me make that sale, I want to get that sale. Yeah. So that's,
Yeah, but that's not recognizing that we live in a society that has been systematically discriminating minorities for hundreds of years, and so we need laws in place to kind of elevate that inequity that has been created by laws themselves. And so the role of the government is supposed to be public good. I know that's a joke because of all the corruption and bureaucracy we see, but that is a role. It's the only entity that's going to care about the public good. Theoretically speaking. A capitalist venturist is only going to care about profit maximization. They may care about public good at some level, but at the end of the day, it's all about profit maximization. Yeah. And that's it. And so in my personal opinion, I don't think that can work. I think there needs to be government in there that is fair and equitable to kind of protect the common man. That's the way I look at it, especially because we are embedded with inequities because of those laws in the past that were inequitable.
Sure. Well, we could go back and forth on this for a while. Yeah. So I would love to, but we're already about an hour and a half in. Oh wow. So I'd love this discussion is fun, but I can't keep going on it with the time we have. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the bonus interview section. We'll wrap it up. Sound good?
Sure, sounds fun.
Good. Okay, cool. All right, so bonus interview section. Question number 1. If you had to eat at one restaurant for the rest of your life, which restaurant would you choose?
Gosh. Well, the best food I've ever had is Italian in Italy. Okay. So if I could have that every day, I could maybe. If I could find a restaurant like that.
That would be it. Okay. They'd have to have a lot of diverse choices, I'm sure. Yeah. Lots of different choices. If you were reincarnated as an animal, what would you want to be?
Elephant.
Elephant. You
Yeah.
didn't even have to think about it.
No.
Why an elephant? Just because they're so smart?
Well, yes, that,
Yeah.
and they're very kind and caring and just gentle souls.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
Well, that's what I want to be. I mean, that's what I strive towards, right?
Oh, hey, there
Isn't
you
that
go.
what we all strive towards
Hey,
being?
I agree. I agree. Yeah, I would have to be like an eagle or something. Something is like, because I think flying is the coolest thing ever. I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
Man, I would
Yeah.
love to just be able to fly
Well,
around.
elephants live really long lives too.
Do they?
I think so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know much about elephants,
Yeah.
to tell you the truth. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll bring an elephant expert onto the show.
Yeah.
We'll really dive into this. All right, so we have one last question. If you could have worked for one person in history, who would you have wanted to work for?
Perhaps it would be Barack Obama.
Okay.
I don't know. I just, I think he's a really kind man, and I think a lot of the values that he has align. I mean, he certainly made a lot of mistakes along the way. But I think his values align with the America that I see and that I envision for my kids and the future generation. So working under him would help me to kind of achieve that desire, because that's, I guess, what he does. I mean, that's, I'm thinking you probably don't agree. But
I would not have wanted to work for Obama.
yeah.
Or maybe I would have to know what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that would have been my first choice.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I want to take that back or not, but because when you first said it, the first thing I thought about was a woman who was integral in the civil rights movement in the 60s, like Gloria Steinem or one of these women who really worked really, but I think there's so many unknowns there that have not really been lifted. Typically it's men who get all the credit, I don't know. That's
now women have the Hidden Figures movie, so
yeah.
they've now been given credit, but only
Right.
black women. We're not giving anyone else. Well, cool. Well, I've had a blast with this conversation. I've had a really good time. I hope that the audience has gotten something out of this, and I appreciate you coming in today to talk with us.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed getting to know you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for listening to Reaching Out with Zack Carter. I'm your host, Zack Carter, and we'll see you again next time. Bye. Thanks for joining us today at Reaching Out with Zack Carter. If you're looking for ways to support the podcast, head over to our Facebook page and click the like button. Also, head over to YouTube and iTunes and subscribe. You can rate us and leave comments so everyone will know how awesome the show is. Well, thanks again for listening to Reaching Out with Zack Carter. I'm Zack Carter, and we'll see you next week.